If you've clicked on this video, I'm gonna make a guess and say that you find Rekordbox pretty overwhelming as a piece of DJ software. Well, please do not worry, because the reality is it is quite overwhelming, and I certainly did not have a clue what I was doing when I first started using it. However, I'm gonna make that process a lot easier for you, because in today's video, we're gonna go through all of the different performance features, how they work, the different menus, where to find them, so that you have the knowledge and then you can go away and set up Rekordbox in a way that's going to work best for you and your style of DJing. Let's get straight into it. Okay, so welcome into Rekordbox DJ. I have my FLX4 DJ controller connected and I am in performance mode. Before I show you all of the creative menus, features, and how they all work, just very quickly want to give you an overview of the default view. Rekordbox is arranged into kind of two parts. The top half is your performance part, and the second half, the bottom half of the screen, is your collection, your music collection and your playlists. I'm not going to delve too deeply into the music collection side of things today, just because I think that requires a dedicated video. There are a ton of YouTubers out there that have made some fantastic videos all about how to master playlists and be really quite smart with your music collection on Rekordbox. So I do recommend searching some of those videos out. If you do want some more hints and tips on the playlisting side and the track side, the track management side, do drop me a comment and I will try and make that video for you. Now, as with other DJ software, Rekordbox operates on a drag and drop kind of basis. So you search for a track and then you just drag and drop it into deck 1 or deck 2. Very quickly, you have your 8 performance pads that are here. I don't have anything, I'm in hot cue mode. These tracks don't have any hot cues assigned. As you can see here, so we've got the hot cues there. And then these 8 performance pads will change depending on what pad mode you select. So as you can see here, if I go through the FLX4, I've got my pad effects there. I'm just pressing the button on the DJ controller. And that's the beauty of the DJ controller. You got to think of your DJ controller as like a PlayStation controller controlling a console. So it will change some of the things on Rekordbox. You don't always have to use your mouse and click, but you might for certain features depending on the level of control that your controller will allow. So in my hot cues, I don't have anything there. If I switch over to pad effects, you can see there. And these 8 kind of buttons here correspond to the 8 performance pads on that particular deck. You have your waveform running horizontally across the top. That is the full track of both decks, because I've got a track loaded in each. Track title, the BPM, that is the master BPM, that will not change even if you increase or decrease the tempo. I've got the key information there displayed in alphanumeric. If you do want to change the key to traditional, or you are in traditional and want to move across to alphanumeric, simply click on the preferences, which is this little cog icon here. In the view menu, scroll down and we have key display format. So if I change that to classic, you can see here, that's now saying it's an A minor. If I move up to alphanumeric, that is displayed as an 8A. Just makes key mixing a little bit easier. Then we have our 2 clocks here. One is a countdown timer, so telling you how much time you've got remaining on a record. The other one counts up. So this is basically, just counts up like a traditional kind of record player or CD player. Remember those? So depending on your preference, you've got both of those to look at there. Then you have key sync. So you can actually change the key of the track, and also the key sync button. Now, this is an example of a feature that you would have to activate using your mouse unless you map it to another button, which we're not going to get into today. Basically, that blue button, you can see here, I've indicated that will basically match the key of the 2 tracks there. So you can do some harmonic mixing. If your controller has a key sync button on it and you press it, then it will just activate it, but the FLX4 doesn't, hence why I've just pressed it with the mouse. And then we've also got our BPM sync here. So as soon as I press beat sync on the actual controller, you can see here on deck 1, we have got that BPM sync now illuminated. Underneath that BPM sync indicator, we have what is the sync master. This is very, very important because basically what will happen is whichever deck is set as the master, when you press beat sync, it will match the BPM to the master deck. So if the master is set to 129 BPM, for example, and the other playing deck is not the master and that's 120 BPM, it will speed up that track to match the master and vice versa. So if that 120 BPM track was the master deck and you press BPM sync, it will slow down the 130 BPM track down to 120. Underneath that, you've then got your virtual deck. If it's got the blue circle inside, that means you're in vinyl mode, basically meaning when you touch the platter of the controller, let me just move that out of the way, the platter of the controller, it behaves like a vinyl turntable. There is a keyboard shortcut should you want to turn that off. On a Mac, it is Command A for deck 1 or Command S for deck 2. But again, if you're not sure on that, all you need to do is click on the cog, click on keyboard, go onto the deck section and then find vinyl mode to find out what your keyboard shortcut is. But that blue circle basically just indicates vinyl mode. You got your BPM information there. However, that is a BPM reading that will change depending on what you set the tempo to. So if you can see here, I'm moving the tempo slider up so you can see the BPM is changing as I move that. And within there, you can also see the percentage that you are moving that tempo up and down by. So I've got that by +2, +3, up to +3. You then also have the tempo range, again, which you can change in the software. On the FLX4, for example, we don't have a dedicated tempo range button unless you hold Shift and beat sync, which can be a little bit fiddly. So you could just do this with a little mouse click here. So you've got ±16, wide, ±6, ±10. Next up here, we have got our beat loop and auto and manual loop here. So AU just means auto, MA is just manual. So if you have that on manual, it's just like an in-out button, much like what you get at the top of the FLX4. So if I click the in there, if I click the track there, click in and then out, you can see there I've got a manual loop and the buttons are highlighted in that orange color. Auto just means that you are predetermined the loop by a set length. So we've got a 4-beat loop here. You can change that to an 8-beat loop, 16-beat loop, etc., etc. If you do want a little bit of extra control over your tracks, for example, editing beat grids, etc., I would probably recommend doing this before you actually connect the controller, and do watch my video on this. I've already got on the channel. I will leave a link in the description. However, if you want to do this in performance mode, very easy. All you need to do is switch away from those performance pads down to this second menu on the left, or if you're on deck 2, the right. So switch over to this menu here. And here we have the BPM information. So if you think the BPM is wrong, you can adjust it here. You can shift the beat grid left, right, and adjust everything to do with the grid here. But I would probably recommend doing this in export mode just because it's a little bit simpler than doing it in performance mode. But do watch my video on what I do when I import tracks into Rekordbox. Now we've got the basics out of the way, let's talk about the different customizations in terms of views and also all of the creative menus that are available to you and how they work, because this is where it can get quite overwhelming quite quickly just because there is a huge amount of control when it comes to Rekordbox. First and foremost, we have from left to right, these menus here. This is going to be really the kind of hub as to how you can customize your view on Rekordbox. We have our different views. We've got export mode, performance mode, and edit mode. Edit basically is a track editor within Rekordbox. However, if you want to export those edited tracks back into your collection, you are going to need to pay for a premium subscription. Export mode is basically the mode whereby you can prepare your tracks, adjust waveforms, BPMs, grids, add hot cues, etc. But for export generally onto a USB stick so that you can then use your tracks on CDJs. And performance mode is the mode that we are in right now, most suited for controllers. That is the mode that enables you to have a performance within Rekordbox. Over to the right of that, we then have the layout changes. So these two tram lines here, if you don't want the waveforms, for example, that run up and down the middle of the screen, you might want to change that to 2-deck horizontal. So we now have the waveforms running from right to left at the top of the screen. If you have a 4-deck controller, so you want to see the waveforms of all 4 decks, you can even have that. And you have 4 virtual decks there, but of course your playlists are going to be somewhat limited at the bottom there. You don't have a lot of space left to scroll through your tracks. You can do the same on 4-deck, but have it vertically. And if you don't want the waveforms at all, you're just quite happy to have most of your screen dedicated to your tracks, and you can do everything by ear, then you might want it in browse mode. This still allows you to perform, but you just won't see much of it visually on screen. For the most part though, I personally have it on 2-deck vertical. I know a lot of people like the 2-deck horizontal though. Moving one over to the right, we have got the Show Hide FX panel. So this is where you're going to get a lot of your mixer effects, both the sound color effects and also the beat effects. Now, a lot of these buttons, because it looks quite overwhelming when you have your FX1 and FX2 here, this top row is basically your beat effects. So the effects found in the bottom right-hand corner of the mixer. And then underneath that, you have got your CFX. Those are the sound color effects, which are effectively the dials underneath the EQ of your mixer. And please don't let this get too overwhelming. Basically, you want to split the screen in half. So everything up to that first waveform where my mouse is now is going to control the left-hand deck, channel 1, or maybe channel 3 if you're on a 4-deck mixer, 4-deck controller. Everything to the right is deck number 2, and everything is the same. So you can copy and mirror what you're doing on deck 1 as on deck 2, or you can do something completely different. But there's basically 2 sets of controls on each line split in half. That's how you got to view it. A lot of the numbers and the names, the words, etc. are in quite small writing on this effects panel. And so please use your controller to its full advantage here with regards to selecting the effects. So on the FLX4, for example, you can see here I have channel 1 selected at the moment. If I change that using the switch on the actual controller, you can see this box will jump over to channel 2. So that's where the controller really comes into play. Or if you want both channels selected, you can do that. That's all from the controller. Now, I'm not saying you can't use the mouse. You absolutely can do that. However, I would say the controller really is going to help you out a lot here, especially if you're in a dark environment and you're looking for little numbers and little names, etc. If we move across, we have our effects drop-down menu. So this is just all of the different effects. And again, you can control this on the controller. I'm clicking the buttons on the controller to scroll down the different effects, but equally you can use the mouse. And then underneath that, we have our parameters. So this is currently that half beat echo, because that number there is 1/2. You can again adjust the beat on the controller, so you can scroll up and down. So this is the beat effect. So Yeah, 1 beat, 2 beats, 4 beats. It's a small number, but once you know where it is, then you always know where to look for it. And then this little tiny dial to the left of the beat increments for those beat effects is the level and depth. So basically the intensity of the effect, once again controlled by the dial on your controller. So if I move the mouse out the way so you can't see the words, you can see there as I move the dial on the controller, you can see the intensity going up and down. Again, you can move it by mouse, but it's just easier on the controller. To the right of that, you then have a couple of extra parameters. This will need to be controlled via your mouse because we don't have controls on the actual FLX4 by default for these additional settings. What we basically have here is the feedback. I always have that set to halfway. Basically, all that means it's the level of tail off of your effect. So if you have, say, an echo effect on, it will echo and get quieter and quieter till it finishes. But if you have that set all the way down to 0, it basically echoes once and then stops. So it's kind of like the tail off of the effect. Have a play around with it and see what you think. Then you have got this rev button here. That's simply an on-off. Basically, that just sends everything in reverse. And then next to that, you have a filter. This is basically applying a high pass or a low pass filter to the effect that you have selected. And then next up, we have got the freeze, which is basically like a slip mode. So you're going to be playing the effect, but the track is still going to be playing underneath. So it's like a slip mode. I don't know why they call it freeze. That's the best way I can think of it. And then over to the right of that, we have our release effects, which are activated by pressing Shift and holding the on-off button on the effects on the FLX4. But basically you've got a few different release effects to choose from. I do have a video dedicated to these because they are a little bit hidden away on my channel. I will leave a link to that down in the description down below. And then it is exactly the same for the other deck. So we're not going to go on to FX2 because it's exactly the same as FX1. But hopefully now you can see that this is not too daunting, not too overwhelming. Now, the great thing with Rekordbox DJ, and even it's better than a DJing mixer, is if you have this single dot illuminated, that is a single effect being applied to your track, of course with a bit of filter maybe. But you also have the possibility of applying multiple layered effects onto your tracks. And if you want to do that, you simply click on this 3-dot button here. Now you can see here what we have is now this has opened up 3 individual effects boxes, and this is going to require a little bit of manipulation on the laptop because again there's a limitation on the controller itself. But say for example you want to have an echo that's half a beat, let's do that, an echo that is half a beat, which is chopped up using trans of half a beat as well, and it also has, I don't know, a pan from left to right. So you can have 3 effects, and then what you can do is you switch it on, you can switch on the first effect on the controller and then use the mouse to switch on the other 2 effects. So yeah, you can have a layered effect, which is pretty cool. It's quite creative. It's something to have a play around with. Personally, I just have 1 effect on rather than 3. I think it's a bit much. It can make things sound a little bit crowded myself, but that's just me. Underneath that, we have got our CFX. Remember, these are controlled by the dials underneath the EQs on the mixer. But basically what we have here is a single CFX. That's similar to the deck above. So the single dot, you can select which effect you want using the drop-down list. The parameter is how intense that effect is. That's that there. And basically this will just apply that same CFX to each channel on your mixer, and you just switch it on by making sure that you've got a blue box around it. Now, the beauty of the Rekordbox software in comparison to a DJing mixer is that you can actually apply different color effects to the different channels, which is quite cool. So for example, on channel 1, you might want to have a filter and you want to have that switched on, so that's now got a filter on it. On channel 2, you might want dub echo, and so that has got a different effect. So if you want to mix and match, you can absolutely do that. So hopefully that effects menu is a little bit less daunting for you. Now I'm going to just remove the effects panel. So if you want to click out of the effects panel, if you're not using effects, you can switch them on and off as much as you want. I don't have the mix point link featured because I don't pay for Rekordbox. So if you see a little padlock there, it just means that you don't pay for that particular part of the software. Next up, we have our sampler panel. So if we click on that, you notice these sample pads that have now been applied underneath the waveform. So this is where you can load up different samples like air horns, sound effects, or even record your own samples. I have got a video about how to record your own samples in Rekordbox. I'll leave a link to that video down in the description. So basically all you need to do is once you hit the sampler mode on your FLX4 or your controller that has it, basically your performance pads will now control these 8 sample pads. That's all it does. If your controller does not have a sampler performance pad mode, then this is just how you activate the samples. And you can set up keyboard shortcuts if you want to in order to activate these samples. That is absolutely possible. If you just go into your preferences and click keyboard there, you have the sampler there. So these are the playback shortcuts right there, but you can set your own ones if you want to. So that is that menu there, but if you don't want the sample pad showing, you just click it off there. Next up, we have the mixer panel. This is going to be particularly useful for FLX2 users, in my opinion, because you do not have a trim on the FLX2, but you do have it here. Now, I personally don't really have this mixer panel showing, but here you have got the volume sliders, which of course your controller will control. You have your EQs in the middle there, and then you also have got your trim, which I mentioned is useful for FLX2 users. Now, in addition to that, you also have your crossfader controls. Now, there's no crossfader on-off button on an FLX4 or on FLX2. And if you find that the crossfader is just getting really annoying and you want it switched off, this is the menu that you need to activate in order to switch it on and off. So we have it on 1 and 2, but if you just have the blue boxes switched off, then that switches off the crossfader. It still responds that I'm moving it on the actual controller, but it just switches it off. And there are also some microphone settings here. So you can actually EQ your mic here, and you can also activate talk over mode here, and also add effects to the mic. So if you want to add a bit of reverb to your voice, if you want to sound a little bit like squeaky, then you can adjust the pitch, and you can also add some echo. But for the most part, personally, I don't have the mixer panel shown. And then finally, just before we finish, I'm going to just show you this record panel. This is basically how to activate recording in the software. Couple of caveats to this. You can only record with tracks that you actually physically own. So if you use streaming platforms, you will not be able to use this feature directly in the software. You will have to buy an external recorder. However, if you want to record, it's very simple. You make sure that your levels are all fine. You can adjust the levels there using your mouse, and then you just hit record, and then you can save the recording. You have the recording, and then you can share that to social media or wherever you want to post your mix. So that is the record. And I say, this is all available in the free version of Rekordbox. So there we have an insight into the performance features and menus of Rekordbox and where to find everything. And by now you should have all of the knowledge that you need to go away and set up Rekordbox in a way that is going to work for you as a DJ. If you do have any questions, please leave them in the comments down below. I always read them and I'm always happy to help you out. Please like this video by giving it a thumbs up for the YouTube algorithm. If you swipe across and hit hype, that would be amazing. Subscribe if you haven't done so already, and I'll catch you in the next one.